Hey guys, welcome back into our second ever Historical Monday. Today, we're continuing our series on the Afghanistan War, and we're talking about the initial invasion of the U.S. Army into Afghanistan. Should be great. So to recap last week, remember there's Afghanistan, the government of Afghanistan is the Taliban. The Taliban are sort of a fundamental Islamic state, and they're hosting, or they allow Al-Qaeda, the terrorist organization, to sort of have camps and be established in Afghanistan. Once 9/11 attacks happen, the US government says to the Taliban, hey guys, you should really hand over bin Laden, you should, get rid of Al-Qaeda, and the Taliban say, you know what, we're not going to do that, and they don't do it, so the US decides to invade. Really important to remember is there's this little group called the Northern Alliance that are still tucked away that are not actually ruled by the Taliban, and they come into play. And so when the US government decides to invade Afghanistan, they can choose different ways of going about this. And the natural sort of traditional way of going about invasions, right, is you get a massive invasion force, you mass on the borders, and then you invade. But the US government thought, we don't really want to do this, that takes a lot of time, we don't have a lot of assets in Central Asia. Remember, Afghanistan's sort of tucked away right in the middle of Central Asia, a place where the US doesn't have a lot of military bases. And so what they instead do is they opt for a really sort of ingenious, small-scale invasion force, and it consists of this. They take about 300 or 400 CIA officers who sort of know the local languages, know the tribal dynamics, and they insert these CIA officers with sort of special forces teams. And they start to go around first in the Northern Alliance, and so the CIA officers will go to tribal leaders and they'll ask for the tribe to sort of join the US cause. If they'll ask them, or if they need to, they'll literally have bundles of suitcases of cashes and they'll bribe the tribal leaders into joining this American-led sort of invasion. So what ends up happening is the US government and the CIA, they start to co-opt all these local Afghanistan tribal groups, and they start to push south in the invasion force. And so you've got the most of the manpower, the muscle, is the local Afghan tribal forces, but they're sort of strategically led by the special forces and the CIA, which is a really cool way, I think, of doing it, because you use the local assets on the ground, the local people who have intelligence, who have knowledge about the terrain and the people, but you get to have like this sort of strategic advantage of having, US thought, strategic thought. Equally, if not more important than all of this, is the fact that the US has overwhelming air superiority. So what ends up happening is, obviously they're pushing south, this sort of coalition of US and Afghan forces are pushing south, and as they come into Taliban regions, as they come into targets, the Taliban forces will identify these targets, the special forces will then go in and mark these targets, and you'll have the US Air Force sort of rushing in and basically obliterating these targets, because, I don't know if you know this, but the Taliban didn't invest heavily in anti-aircraft defenses because, they didn't have any money. And so within 88 days, this sort of coalition American Afghanistan force pushes south to Kandahar, and Kandahar is sort of the base, the capital of the Taliban government, and they take Kandahar. And they actually push the Taliban pretty much all the way out of Afghanistan. However, not everything is so rosy in paradise, because although you have a very successful initial invasion, although you have initial political legitimacy and a leadership unified around Hamid Karzai, there is this huge, massive, grandiose problem on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. So what ends up happening is you have the initial invasion that pushes and squeezes Al-Qaeda and the Taliban all the way to the east and the south of the country, right on the border of Pakistan. But it's so porous that most of the Taliban, most of Al-Qaeda actually slip through this border and end up finding a safe haven in the Pakistani tribal areas. Now this border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, not only does it play a role in this initial invasion, but all the way up until today, the sort of porous nature of this border means that the Taliban can be based in Pakistan or in borderless regions of Afghanistan and launch attacks into Afghanistan, because it's so hard to sort of monitor and patrol this huge mountainous border region. So what does the realist think about all this stuff? Well, the first thing is this. The US, in invading Afghanistan, actually had the broad support of the international community. Now this is really important, because having broad international support adds legitimacy to the effort, to the war effort, and it's something we had in Afghanistan, and it's something, very importantly, we don't have when we invade Iraq. Second point the realists can take away is this. Overwhelming air superiority is such a valuable asset, but it's only as valuable as the human intelligence you have on the ground directing that air superiority. Now, this is a lesson that we learned in this wonderful war in Vietnam, where we had massive overwhelming air superiority and we dropped more tonnage of bombs than we dropped in all of World War II, but it actually wasn't very effective because we didn't have the intelligence on the ground telling us attack here. Yes, it was successful. No, it wasn't successful. Attack here. It was just sort of bomb the entire jungle, right? But in Afghanistan, we had sort of very good human intelligence on the ground because we were joining forces with local Afghans running through the land that they knew, that they could identify the people, they could identify the structures, and the special forces had the ability to literally laser guide these weapons into targets. The combination of air superiority and human intelligence and good guidance systems on the ground, when those two are mixed, you've got a very, very, very potent weapon to use, right? So always remember that air superiority is very, very valuable, but only as valuable as how accurate it can be on the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, the last thing that we need to take away from this, the realist can give to you, and this is free, you don't have to pay for this, but I know a lot of you guys like to invade countries. I know a lot of you guys are thinking about invading countries. Just remember this when you're invading a country. When you are invading a country that is completely landlocked and might border countries that have sort of nefarious or alternate views of how that country should go, your best option is to secure the border, right? Always secure the border. So let me say it again, and you might want to repeat after me. When invading a country that is completely landlocked and surrounded by other countries that might have similar or might have very different or diametrically opposed viewpoints of how that country should react, you should always, 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 always control and protect the border. And so that's it. That's it for today. If you're invading a country, make sure the leader that you install has the legitimate backing of the people. Make sure your air superiority is matched with human intelligence on the ground. And again, please, please secure the border. All right, that's it for today. Love having you guys watch History Mondays. Feel free to comment below. If you really like the video, share them, subscribe to the channel. And remember, reality always trumps ideology.